Hey everybody, it's Dr. PA, founder of PA and Associates Consulting Group, and I put together a presentation today to really dive into SEL, of course, and what actually makes it work. Like, what does it take to implement SEL so that you actually start to see differences in your behaviors? So I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. And the first thing that I want to do is go ahead and let you know that if you're watching this and you have any questions or comments along the way, it's going to be posted on different platforms. So go ahead and leave a comment below. I'm also going to share my email information towards the end of this presentation. So along the way, though, as you're watching, if anything comes up that you have a question about or you need further clarification on or you just want to share your feedback, go ahead and drop it in the comments below. All right, so let's go ahead and dive right in. So, of course, we're going to talk about the problem, right? So, what is the problem right now? The major problem, and I know there's a lot of problems, but the major problem right now, from what I'm hearing from other educators, from what I'm seeing, from the feedback that I'm getting, is the behavior challenges that we're facing in schools post-pandemic. All right, and this is nationwide. I'm not just pinpointing that it's happening in this school and not in the other, that sort of thing, but there's definitely been a rise in behavioral challenges nationwide. So the very first thing that I want to talk about is the fact that for the most part, okay, in some rare instances this has happened, but for the most part, students were not giving time to heal from the trauma associated with the pandemic. So it's almost like we just, started school and we're like, okay, we're just going to go ahead and establish this new normal. But nobody talked about what that new normal would look like. And nobody really addressed the trauma that students, and not just students, but staff as well, experienced during the pandemic. All right. And the next problem is that most schools, when you talk about these behavior challenges, are taking on a reactive approach to behavior management. Okay, and that simply means that instead of finding ways to prevent these behaviors or finding systems and supports to put in place to support these students with these behaviors, we're basically just waiting for these behaviors to happen and then we're responding to them, right? Which isn't always good, because now you're spending most of your time just dealing with behaviors and you're not really able to focus on the other things that matter. Okay. Next thing with the problem is that social emotional learning isn't really being implemented, okay, or not taught at all. And this is a major issue because a lot of times it's almost taken on as something that's superficial, or, because educators have so much on their plates right now, it's looked upon as something extra. And I think it's looked upon that way because we haven't really taken the time out to implement it the correct way, and we haven't taken the time out to show people how to actually implement it so that it works, and so that it's done seamlessly throughout the day across the board and everybody's able to benefit from it. So that's another problem. Now, you guys know how I feel about social emotional learning, but what I want to say is I used to think of myself as a problem solver before, and I've really changed my mentality, and now I think of myself as a solution seeker. So when I think about the behavior challenges that schools are experiencing right now nationwide, what I feel is the solution is to embed social emotional learning into everyday instructional practices, and that's in a way where it's done seamlessly and it's done as if it's expected, and it's done as if it's woven into the things that we do every single day in school, so that it's not something extra. Okay, it's almost like second nature. All right, and I do understand that this doesn't come easily for a lot of people. So this is what I'm going to talk about that we offer in our signature SEL package later on. So that obviously is the solution, and everything that I talk about moving forward is going to focus on that as the solution. All right. Now, The one thing that I want to start off with is this quote. Now, this is something that I actually put from the internet, and I came across it on a social media site. And you all know that I responded, but then I also took some time out because I noticed that a lot of the people who were respondents, of course, were teachers, and they were talking about how they already have so much on their plates and how they don't see how SEL can actually support them in the classroom, and it's not a solution that's going to fix everything that they're experiencing. And overall, I felt that the energy was just very negative, and I really took some time to think about why they felt that way. All right, so I'm going to go into some supports that could be used that can be implemented easily to get you started. But first, I want to go ahead and dissect what's being said here. So it says, stop telling educators that classroom management and relationships will fix all discipline problems. These things definitely help, but insinuating that they completely alleviate the problem is demeaning to teachers. Sometimes you can have the best classroom management and relationships and still have major disciplinary issues with the student. Now, I'm going to take some time out. I want you to really just think about what's being said right here, because, what I see right here is a cry for help, and I'm going to actually explain to you why. And it's going to look a lot clearer when I actually break this down into segments where we can really dissect it and understand what the root of the issues are. So in the very first section where it says, stop telling educators that classroom management and relationships will fix all discipline problems, what I want to focus on here is the word all right? SEL will not fix all discipline problems, at least not alone, okay? Now, what it will do, if done correctly, is reduce or significantly reduce those discipline problems, okay? Now, the next paragraph says, these things definitely help, but insinuating that they completely alleviate the problem is demeaning to teachers. Again, SEL will not completely alleviate these problems. And I can understand how it could be demeaning to teachers to say that, because it's almost like we're taking this big responsibility and we're just putting it on the shoulders of, teachers in the classroom, when in reality, when you're implementing social emotional learning, or, the parts of social emotional learning that's being discussed here, which is classroom management and relationships, you really need to have buy-in. And you really do need to have support from the top all the way down to the bottom, okay? And it needs to be something that everybody's on the same page with, okay? So you insinuating that if you have these relationships and if you have, classroom management that is going to completely alleviate these discipline problems, I guess it can be looked upon as demeaning to teachers. But once again, if it's implemented correctly, okay, and here, if you go back to that first section, it says classroom management. It doesn't say good classroom management, all right? It doesn't say authentic relationships or meaningful relationships. So we're really talking about in general terms here. And then the last section where it says, sometimes you can have the best classroom management and relationships and still have major disciplinary issues with the student. So now we're talking about the best in this section here. Now, are you going to experience disciplinary issues even if you do have very good classroom management and relationship? Yes, you do. But the thing about it is, if you're implementing social emotional learning the right way, it helps you to deal with those disciplinary issues when they come up. It may not alleviate them. That might be completely impossible, but it will give you tools, okay? Tools that you can use to deal with those disciplinary issues in case they do arise. All right? So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, and go ahead in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about this comment. I know that we all have different perspectives and different experiences, but I'm hoping that by the end of this presentation, you have a better idea of what it means to actually implement social emotional learning effectively. So I just wanted to go ahead and share that briefly with you. So I'm going to go ahead and dive right in, because I feel like it's important to differentiate between classroom management and relationships, even though they go hand in hand. they do differ. So your classroom management is basically how you manage your daily classroom activities, okay? It's your rules, it's your procedures, it's your expectations, it's how you run your classroom as a whole. It's universal, all right? Now, relationships, that's a completely different beast. Your relationships are personal bonds that you form with your individual students, and these relationships may look different with each student, okay? So they're not the same. Classroom management is more universal. Your relationships that you have with your students are more individualized. All right. And this is important to keep in mind because as we dive a little bit deeper into social emotional learning, and I discussed a little bit more about how these two things work together to support social emotional learning, you're going to understand that both are equally important and that they actually support each other. All right. So and this is going to help you understand it a little bit better. So what we have here in this graphic right here, you can see that relationships are directly in the middle. All right, you have your relationships. On the outside of the relationships, you have classroom management and you have academics. Now, what we could actually replace classroom management with, if you really wanted to, is that social emotional learning aspect, because this is where we're talking about behavior. All right, so keep that in mind while I'm going over this graphic and what it actually represents. So at the core of everything, you have your relationships. The types of relationships that you have with your students influences their behavior. It influences their academics, like how successful they are in your classroom. All right. And the relationships are at the foundation is because, and I want to go ahead and quote someone on this: kids don't learn from people that they don't like. All right, they really don't. All right, so this is why relationships are so important. And I'm not saying that every student has to like you in order for them to learn in your classroom. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that when you form those authentic relationships with your students, you will start to see that your students will go above and beyond to meet your expectations. And I've had people tell me before, well, I didn't have relationships with my students and they still did good. And I guess my comeback to you would be, okay, well, how much better could they have done if you actually took time out to form those meaningful relationships with your students? All right. How could that have resulted in better outcomes in your classroom, in your student success? All right. So I'm going to leave you with that. And, towards the end of this, I realized, like, okay, let's go ahead and discuss what SEL is, because everybody has a different definition for social emotional learning. Some people believe that it's just, a curriculum that you implement, or we have this curriculum, so that means we're implementing SEL, or, we have circles anytime that an unwanted behavior comes up, so we are an SEL school, those sorts of things. Or, I check in with my students in the morning, so I'm implementing SEL, when in reality, SEL is actually all of those things together. It works together for the implementation of it holistically. All right. So the first thing that you can see here is that you have to take on a whole child approach. And that means combining your behavior and academic supports to help support all of your students. And sometimes this takes the form of MTSS, which is multi-tier systems of supports, which is broken down into 3 tiers: tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And you have those assessments in place in both behavior and academics to see where your students fall. Are they, in tier 1? Are they in tier 2? Or are they in tier 3? And then you give them those tier supports to help them be successful. And this actually helps to create or improve equitable outcomes in your school or classroom. The next thing is mindset. All right. And that means understanding student needs and recognizing that some students carry a greater load than others. And what do I mean by that? A lot of times we tend to look past the fact that students are also humans too. They go through things outside of the classroom that will possibly influence their behavior inside of the classroom. And this is important to understand because different kids come with different size loads, and those loads may be lighter, some loads may be heavier. All right. And understanding that also helps to take out the idea that anytime a student displays unwanted behavior or is disrespectful, that you believe that is a personal attack on you. 9 times out of 10, it is not. It is nothing personal. It is something that is stemming from experiences outside of school or sometimes even in school that is negatively impacting their behavior. All right. So keeping that mindset is important. The other thing, which is relationships, and not just regular relationships, but meaningful relationships. Okay. Effective teachers actually take time out and are intentional about building meaningful relationships with their students because it helps to find those connections, and it can have a direct effect on learning outcomes. It can help improve those learning outcomes in the classroom. And if I had more time in this presentation, I would be able to tell you how, but I don't right now. So I'm going to go ahead over to the next slide. All right. So if you're willing and able to go ahead and get started and you don't know where to start with social emotional learning, okay, this sounds great. What do I do? And I try to keep it as simple as possible. So the very first thing that you want to do is go ahead and get that buy-in. All right. And before you get that buy-in, what you really want to do is assess the needs. So if you're a teacher, you want to think about the behaviors that you've been seeing in the classroom. If you're an administrator, you want to think about the behaviors that you've been seeing school-wide, and then you want to take into account the goals. So what do you want it to look like? All right. And then you establish a plan for what that could look like and how to get there. And you present that. That's how you get the buy-in. All right. Everybody has to understand what their roles are. They have to understand what the end goal is. They have to understand what those what the process is going to look like and how they're going to benefit from it. How's your staff going to benefit? How are your students going to benefit? How is it going to help you with your family and community relationships? All of those things have to be brought to the table when you're establishing buy-in. Either buy-in with your staff, buy-in with your students, buy-in, with all stakeholders. That's important, because if you don't have buy-in, it's not going to work. You're going to have people who are going to show you what you want to see for the time and then slowly move away from it. And you're not going to make any progress that way. So the next thing is going to be consistency. So whatever plan you decide to go with, you have to stay consistent. All right. And that means having checkpoints in place where okay, this isn't working. We need to switch this up. We need to be a little bit more flexible about our approach. We need to switch some things around. Or this is working. We need to dive in a little bit more. And you need to be consistent with that. Okay. You want to make sure that you keep the momentum going and that you keep that buy-in going and that you're constantly finding ways to make it better. So consistency. The other thing is relationships. Okay. Be intentional about those relationships. All right. Relationships are at the core of everything. Okay. And everyone. It's really going to make the difference between you getting and reaching your goal and not reaching your goal. And then the last but not least, is proactive support. So what you don't want to do is wait around and wait for unwanted behaviors to occur and then, address them. You want to have things in place that's either going to, number one, prevent those behaviors from happening, or have present those supports when it does happen, when those unwanted behaviors do occur. So in short, you want to be prepared. All right. You want to be prepared. And I'll give you an example. Okay. So I was recently looking at something on the internet, and there was an issue with a student. And what happened was this student got into a dispute with a bus driver the day before. And so the parent was called and they were, made aware. And so that student knew that when they got to school the next day, it would be an issue. And they walked into the school and they were showing out, causing a big scene, yelling, screaming out, being disruptive, not listening to, staff and anything else. And it took a couple people to actually get this student out of the bathroom to a different location and try to calm them down. It was just very hectic that morning. So in my mind, what I was thinking was, okay, well, if we know that this student is coming in and that if I know my student, I know that this is going to be the reaction the next day. All right. What I would have done would be to have met that student at the door and prepared the alternate location and had someone present to talk to them, to address how they're feeling about the situation, to get, a better idea of what happened the day before, and just been prepared when that student actually came. All right. And that's what I mean besides being reactive. That's what I mean. being proactive, like addressing it and being prepared to address it before the behavior actually occurs. Anytime you have the opportunity to do that, do it. All right. It's so much more effective and it's a lot less stressful. All right. So those are some of the things that you want to make sure that you have in place. Now, if you're ready and like, okay, I'm liking what you're talking about, Dr. PA, what can I do to get started? All right. So what you want to do is go ahead and establish some school-wide expectations, or if you're a teacher, establish your classroom expectations. And if you already have them established as a teacher, what you want to do is go back and take a look at what those expectations are and think about if those expectations have been successful in your classroom. If not, you want to go ahead and, adjust accordingly. Now, if you're an admin, you want to make sure you have school-wide expectations. And sometimes this takes the form of PBIS. There's a lot of resources online with PBIS, which makes this easier. A lot of graphic organizer and examples that you can look upon that you can just easily, start school-wide. Keep it simple, okay? Keep it simple. The next thing that you want to make sure that you have in your classrooms is corrective consequences. Now, corrective consequences are important because a lot of times we get very hooked into the fact that we just want to discipline students, all right? And that really doesn't work, because if you're simply disciplining students, you're not really getting to the core of the problem. And 9 times out of 10, what's going to happen is those behaviors are going to still occur. So with corrective consequences, you give students the opportunity to correct their behaviors. All right. So I'll give you an example. I used to have a corrective consequence in my class where after 3 warnings, that's parent communication. So that student would know, okay, that's warning number 1. And what I would do is I would point it out and I would, talk to that student. Okay, well, I've asked you to do X, Y, and Z, and you haven't. Can you please do X, Y, and Z, whatever that is, or rephrase it in a way that they understand. And so they will know that if that happens twice, that the 3rd time, now, okay, we're going to call home. All right. That's the first intervention. It's the first consequence. Corrective consequence is to call home. All right. So it's corrective. It's giving them the opportunity to actually fix the behavior before you have to actually respond. And then the next one is rewards, because what you don't want to do is completely forget about those students who are behaving and that are displaying wanted behaviors, because what happens is they start to see that all of your attention is on those students who are misbehaving, and they're like, okay, well, if they're getting that attention, I want attention too, and they also start to misbehave. One of the things that I tried to definitely implement was a 3-to-1 ratio. So for every correction I had to do, I would give out three positive, point out 3 things that were positives with behaviors with students in the classroom. And then the last thing would be circles. And that actually works. So you can have healing circles. You can have circles where you're introducing new topics in the classroom. There's all different type of circles, morning circles that you can have, but circles give students the opportunity to voice how they feel, to provide you the feedback that you need to really assess, what's going on in your classroom and different things like that. And you get a lot of information when you have circles in the classroom. So if you want to go ahead and get started and you're not where to start, I would suggest you begin with school-wide expectations or classroom expectations, corrective consequences, rewards, and circles. All right. Now, what I want to do now, I just want to talk a little bit about our 5-step process at PA and Associates. So we have this process in place because we don't believe in a one-size-fits-all approach. All right. We're very individualized about our approach, and we do that because we understand that different schools have different needs and different goals. So the very first thing that we do after you request a consultation, which is free, first 30 minutes is free, is we do a needs assessment. So we're going to go in, we're going to try to figure out what your needs are exactly. So after this conversation, we go in and we get the information that we need to try to figure out, where your problem areas lie or where your areas in need of improvement are. All right. And that needs assessment could look like a survey. It could look like, it could also look like conversations. with your staff or with parents or with students. It could look like observations. It could take on different forms depending on what your ultimate goal is for us. And then the next thing that we do, which is step 2, is data collection. So we do a data dive and we take that information that we got from our needs assessment and any additional data that you have in school, which could be, behavior referrals. It could be your attendance, any data that you have from that year and the previous year that could really help us hone in on what your needs are and how to address those needs. So after we get all that information and we dive deep into data and we analyze that data and we look for patterns that show us the direction that we need to go in, we plan a strategy call. And during this call is where we discuss and we, add on to our goal setting plan. And it really lays out the map for what it is that we're going to do, what it's going to look like, what our roles are, what your role is. And that map leads us to where it is that we want to be, your ultimate goal. We want to meet and exceed that goal. So we discuss that and we get your feedback. We talk about how you feel about it and you give us any extra information that you feel could be relevant that could help us along the way. We establish checkpoints and different things like that so that we're constantly assessing our progress and we're constantly keeping you in the loop because after all, we're working as partners on this. It's teamwork. Teamwork makes the dream work. And then the fourth thing that we do is we implement that plan. Okay, so we have our goal setting and our planning. Now it's time for implementation. All right. And we're going to go right in and we're going to make sure that you're with us along the way. And we're, doing what it is that we need to do to, follow through with what we need to follow through with so that we can meet and exceed your goals. That's the implementation phase. And that can look different depending on, what the package that you choose and what your goals are. And then ultimately, the last step is sustaining a relationship, because even after we've implemented these things, we want to make sure that you're able to sustain it long term. And we want to make sure that we continue our relationship and stay in touch so that we can support you along the way. So that is our 5-step process. We use it all the time. And like I said, it differs depending on what your needs are and what your goals are in your school. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is our signature package. Now, SEL is our signature package. It's SEL training with a whole child approach. We talked a lot about that, which is important because SEL isn't just one single approach. It's multifaceted. So what's here right now is what we offer in our ultimate package. All right, our highest package, and that is, you get that free 30-minute consultation. So we talked about the data, and that takes the form of a school climate survey. And then you have a training. It's a one-day training. It's Behavior Management 101, the essentials, where I actually dive into your classroom management plan. We create one together, and we put teachers in a position where they can actually take control of their classroom again. We give them supports they need to manage their classroom effectively so that learning can take place. The next professional development or course that you could take is the Realness of SEL, the who, what, and how course. So it can either be a course and you have 90-day access to this. It's between 6 to 8 hours to complete, or this can be administered as a 3-day training. And this is where I really dive into theory. We go over case studies and we talk about real life, behavior scenarios in the classroom and how to approach it. And I like this because it's very collaborative and it's realistic. And you're going to leave this training having a better idea of not just what SEL is, but, the CASEL standards and how to implement it and how they work together to create this positive, collaborative environment where everybody can learn and feel safe. All right. And then the next one is Everyday SEL, Explicit Instructional Strategies. This is a 1-day PD, and this is where I really dive into those SEL strategies. So we participate in and conduct circles together. We talk about different things like the peace path and restorative practices and what that looks like. And I dive into those supports that you need to be proactive when dealing with those challenging behaviors. That's what the PD focuses on. Just explicit instructional strategies. And I do believe also in this training, I touch on relationships a tad bit, because the next one where it says develop a meaningful relationship with students, that's a 2-day PD. And this is where I give you the support you need to be intentional about building meaningful relationships with your students. Because like I said, it isn't one of those things that comes easy, and it's actually something that has to start from day one. So here I begin from the very beginning, like at the very start, what it should look like to be, and what it looks like to be intentional about building those meaningful relationships with your students. And this is something that can really be done seamlessly, but it has to be intentional. All right, so I'll dive into what that looks like. Now, the max for this training is 25 participants. If you have more than that, you have to book additional trainings, but I try to keep it low because I know that there's a lot of information to be shared, and I want to be able to give you the attention that you need during these trainings. So if you have any more questions, you can see I have a page down here that you can visit on my Kajabi website, and it gives you a little bit more information about it. And also on the next slide, I'm going to share with you my information. Like I said, I hope if you have any questions or anything like that, or feedback, that you guys are, drop it in the comments below. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Just talk about my couple of the main points. And again, any questions that you have, drop it. I'll make sure I get back to you. So main points. If you want to get started with SEL, try those tips that I offered. All right. It works. Okay. School-wide expectations, corrective consequences, rewards, circles. Try that at first. The next thing is to be intentional about building those relationships with your students and understanding that behavior and academics work together, guys. They're like yin and yang. You can't have one without the other. All right. Make sure you understand that. And then the other thing is to be authentic. Be your authentic self. Students know when you're not being your authentic self, that you're not being real. So you don't want to start off that way. You want to make sure that you're authentic about yourself and your approach and how you deal with things in the classroom and your attitude and things like that. Make sure students understand that you care, and make sure most of all that they see that you care, because that makes a difference. All right. So I want to thank you for sticking it out with me. If you have any questions or concerns, you can go ahead and email me at info@paandassociates.com. I also have my website address here, drpa.mykajabi.com. Please visit my website. I have a lot of resources there, a lot of information. And if you are interested in our signature package, our SEL training with a whole child approach, I'm going to also drop the Calendly link in the comments section for you to click on. And I hope you reach out, because this is a time when, teachers need that support the most. So I want to thank you for watching this information today, and I hope you got something from it. So until next time, guys, see you later.